Hi, I'm Dr. Wayne Altman. I'm chair of the Department of Family Medicine at Tufts, and we are here today to talk to you about some of the challenges related to mental illness and the COVID-19 pandemic, and some of the challenges our patients are having, patients who have a history of mental illness and patients who don't have a history of mental illness, some of the challenges they're facing. I'm joined today by Dr. Stephanie Power, who is a PhD behavioral psychologist and the director of our integrated behavioral health department at Family Practice Group, which is my family medicine practice where I practice in Arlington, Massachusetts. And some of you may know Dr. Power because she not only teaches in the CAP workshop on challenging patient encounters, but she actually helped design the workshop. So she may be a familiar face to some of you. So thanks so much for joining us, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So the first question I wanted to ask you about some of these challenges that our patients are experiencing is, if there's one thing that is a constant with this physical distancing and the COVID-19 pandemic, it is uncertainty. Lots of things that we've planned have been unplanned, and we can't plan anything. We don't know when this is going to stop. And for some of us, we are able to accept that reality and try and make the best of it. For others, that can be crippling even. And I know you've been talking to patients all day, most days, who are struggling with that. How have you been offering to help them with that?
I think that's a great question. Thanks for asking it, Dr. Altman. I think, in fact, the uncertainty is one of the hardest parts of managing the current pandemic that's going on. So many of us had plans about what the next few months of our lives were going to look like, and this is all being taken away from us. And so I think, first and foremost, what we need to do is validate for our patients and for ourselves that it's really normal to be anxious, frustrated, upset with what's happening. It is natural as human beings to be afraid when we are not able to predict what's going on. We are inherently pattern makers in the way that we think, in the way that we plan our lives, and so having that taken away can be really scary. So I think the first thing we need to do is acknowledge that and validate that this is an expected symptom, expected experience that are happening to people in this situation. And then the next step is, what do we do about it? And for so many of us, what we want to be trying to do is balancing our ability to manage acceptance and change. There's so much of our lives that actually is normally outside of our control. Control is really an illusion, that we think we are safe or that we're going to achieve a certain milestone. And the reality is there's a lot of unforeseen things that pop up in our lives. And so we want to be able to balance the ability to accept that none of us at any points in our lives ever actually have the ability to predict the future or what's going on. We can try to make plans, but plans are not laid out in any kind of cemented way. And then balancing that with the ability to try to focus on what we can focus on. And so right now, for so many of us, what that really actually looks like is trying to have some semblance of structure or routine in our lives. When we get up, when we go to sleep, when we get outside, when we eat meals, trying to create some amount of control and power in a place where we otherwise lack agency is really important for a lot of us to do.
I think that's really helpful. I have a friend who loves talking about Buddhist philosophy, and he told me a long time back that the highest form of suffering, according to Buddhist philosophy, is the inability to accept reality. And I think there are a lot of people suffering with that inability to accept our new normal and our new reality. And so I think a lot of the solution for folks, after they've been validated with these fears and the pain of this new reality, is kind of how to surrender a little bit to this new reality. You also talked about acceptance, which is related to that, and that's the fifth stage of grieving. And, you know, when you've made lots of plans and all of your plans get broken, I think a lot of people are actually grieving the loss of their plans and the loss of their lives as they know them. And so I think accepting reality and acceptance and kind of working through those 5 stages of grieving is a really important part of this. And then, you know, so the next thing is that so many people are spending a lot of time at home now. A lot of time at home with family that they're not used to spending this amount of time with. And they're feeling very isolated at home. And do you have any wisdom about kind of relationships with folks at home that you're spending lots more time with than you're used to spending?
Yeah, I think so many of us have so many expectations for ourselves, our family members, our friends. And what we want to try to do is be mindful of those expectations, because we are trying to hold folks up to a certain standard. And when we're struggling in a place of uncertainty and managing a lot of fear, none of us are going to be our best selves. And so I think, one of the most important things for us to do is to try to have more realistic expectations for the people in our lives, for the people that we're being quarantined or isolating with, and try to have as much compassion for them and ourselves as possible. And I think that is one of the best ways that we're going to be able to get through this. Many of us are not going to remember the day in and day out details of how we were spending our time, but we are going to remember how we felt during this period. And so doing whatever we can to try to have compassion and kindness for the people that we're with and for ourselves is going to go a long way to getting us through this.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are people who have the role of parenting, and you have a role of having partners or brothers and sisters, or other different roles of people who you're living with. And sometimes you might get a little bit exasperated or lose your temper with those folks, and then you remember, oh wait, you're going through this really hard time too. And it's that compassion and empathy, I think, that can go a long way.
Yeah, this is the first time, in my lifetime anyway, that literally the entire world is going through the same suffering at the same time. And it's cutting across countries, ages, races, socioeconomic classes. And we have to recognize we're having this shared human experience together. And so can we do this in a way that really brings about compassion and kindness?
So the other piece of this is being cooped up in our homes and feeling isolated in our homes, and we watch the news and we're told that we're in lockdown and shelter in place and don't leave your homes. And in general, this is good advice. This is a good thing to try and flatten the curve, and not only to take care of ourselves, but to take care of everybody, especially the older members of our society. And I think it's also important to remember that you can practice physical distancing. I prefer to call it physical distancing than social distancing. You can practice that physical distancing and still go outside and still take walks, preferably going to places where there aren't tons of people. Oftentimes just your neighborhood streets are pretty quiet these days. And going out and occasionally seeing a neighbor and walking by them and saying hello and being 6-10 feet away is perfectly fine. You can even meet friends and family to have physical distance walks. And you can go to a nice spot, take a hike, and as long as you're keeping your distance and keeping the different bubbles apart from each other by 10 feet, that's a great way to kind of counter some of that isolation, which kind of melds into the next topic, which is wellness. I think that the wellness piece for patients can go either way with the coronavirus epidemic. And I've been talking to my patients about the Corona 15, Stephanie. And some of you have heard of the Freshman 15, but I have it going in the opposite direction. Freshman 15 is when people enjoy the freedom of the college and cafeterias and gain 15 pounds during their first year at college. But with the Corona 15, I find a lot of patients are actually losing weight. I find that patients are actually having opportunity to take steps more than they ever have before, having the opportunity to exercise more than they ever have before, having the opportunity to get sleep, both quantity and quality, more than they ever have before, having the opportunity to connect with family and friends more, and all of these different things, having the opportunity to kind of prepare what they want to eat and to get the food that they need in order to prepare that food, and also having the opportunity to eat home-cooked food and having hardly any food from restaurants. And all of these things are helping a lot of patients to actually improve their wellness. Hashtag Corona 15. So this is something that I think we can remind patients about, that with the incredible challenges of this pandemic, there are opportunities within this challenge that we can take on. So one other issue that I've heard from a lot of patients, and I suspect you have as well, is some of our patients are really angry with government officials about how they've handled this. And I'm going to try and avoid being political here. We'll do our best.
We'll try.
We understand how people could be angry about that, and yet here we are. And so have you heard the same thing from patients struggling with that?
Yeah, I think folks are really angry with the mixed messaging at the beginning, the slow response, the downplaying of the severity of this, and then this quick to abrupt change and lack of recognition that this is in fact something that's important in matters. And so, yeah, I think anger is a really common experience that a lot of folks are managing right now. And so what do we do about that? I think, one of the things is that first we have to acknowledge that it is normal, it is okay to feel that feeling. For so many people, anger is something that is looked at as an unhealthy feeling or a sign that something is wrong. And I want to invite all of us, including our patients, to accept the full array of human emotions, that they are all important parts of us and our existence. And instead of judging it as a good or bad feeling, we want to look at it with curiosity. Where is it coming from, and why are we having this? And I think for so many of us, anger in this particular situation is coming from a lack of agency and feeling powerless, something happening to us and us not having the full ability to control or manage what is taking place. And so what I have been talking to patients about, and what I encourage you to also do the same, is to try to find a place to empower yourself. Having a voice is so important, no matter how small of a human being we may be. Like, I have little ones at home, right? They're 3 and 4 years old, and even those of us on the other end of the age spectrum, that we all can have a way to have a voice, to be activists in our smaller worlds and in our larger worlds. And so getting out there and doing things to manage that feeling, and by sharing with the world how to make changes in our smaller and larger communities, can be really important. So whether that's talking to state representatives or to higher levels of leadership, whether it's in our own family units, right? It's expressing ourselves, it's sharing our concerns, and those are the very things that are going to go a long way to mitigating the anger that we're feeling.
Yeah, I'm listening to what you're saying, and you talked earlier about having kindness and compassion to others. One of the greatest ways to have agency is to really show that kindness and compassion to others wherever we are, whatever we're doing, and to really model that. I think that goes a long way. I think you were talking about validation again, and validating those feelings. So I think that's an important part. And for me, I watch the news a little bit to stay informed about what's going on, and it doesn't rile me up or make me crippled with anger. When I watch the news, I can get informed and then turn it off because I'm good. It seems to be the same thing every night anyways. And at the same time, many of our patients watch the news and just get beside themselves. And giving them permission, if not a strong recommendation, to shut it off is probably an important thing too.
I think news diets, social media diets are so important. I know diet is an ugly word that we don't like to use when we talk about food, but really giving
in this
ourselves
context, that makes some sense, doesn't it?
Giving ourselves permission to really, like you were saying, often it's the 24-hour-a-day news. There's not really many updates that are happening over the course of the day, and so I'm encouraging a lot of my patients, go once a day, check in, figure out what's going on, so that you feel informed, you feel grounded, and then walk away and reinvest in values. That is one of the most important things, whether we're talking about managing uncertainty, anxiety, anger, handling our wellness goals. When we can use our values, the things that represent who we are at our core, what is most important to us as beings and as people, our own individual specific values, if we can use that as a lens through which we make decisions, it goes a long way to helping so many of the things that we're talking about.
One last question for you, Dr. Power. As healthcare providers, as medical students, as family physician, we are often asked, how do we talk to children about this? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think, as an overall arching goal, what we really always want to do is be developmentally sensitive. And so what that looks like in little kids is going to look like very different information than when we're talking to some of our teenagers or young adults. For the little ones, it's really important to pay attention to their own awareness of what's going on. We don't want to inundate them with information that's going to cause them to feel afraid or feel powerless or not know how to manage it. But we do want to give them some facts, letting them know why they're staying home from preschool or why they're staying home from daycare, because there is this virus, and we are doing our best to try to keep our community safe, and especially some of the older folks in our community who are most vulnerable. And so talking with them about the importance of distancing, physical distancing, as you said, I really like that idea, can be really important. And also germ transmission, letting them know when we cough or we sneeze, if we don't do that in a tissue or in our elbow, that we are potentially spreading our germs amongst the world, and even teaching them good lessons about hand hygiene can be really important. The big takeaway with the little kids is as the grown-ups in their lives, it's really important for us to connote a sense of control and responsibility so that we can help them to continue to feel safe. Now, with our older kids, the older group, adolescents and beyond, I think it's actually important to be really radically genuine about how this is impacting you, letting them know that you're scared, you're frustrated, you're worried, because they are feeling all of those feelings, and we want to model for them that it is normal and appropriate and acceptable to display those feelings out into the world, that we don't have to be strong and keep it together, that sometimes hearing that kind of message is completely at odds with what's actually going on in their bodies, in our own bodies, and then we want to let them know it's okay, and then also be talking with them about ways to go ahead and manage that and what they can do to get through this time.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you for sharing that wisdom. I want to remind everyone, in this pandemic, the world has been changing at a furious pace. And today, the day that we are videotaping this is April Fool's Day. It is April 1st, 2020. And so just to give you a sense that we are talking about the April 1st reality today, and when you're watching this, there might be some realities that have changed by the time that you're watching this. And we hope that you all will take good care of yourselves during this pandemic and do a good job modeling functional ways to manage your own stress for yourselves, for your families, for your patients. And we wish you all the best, and please keep in touch if there's anything we can do to help you with this process.